Ethan wanted to talk a little bit about the USC defense. Let's do that. And hey, boy, Jeff Rodriguez, he's on fire here. A lot of pointed and I think on point comments from Jeff, as always, one of our most loyal viewers here on the USC channel, the voice of college football. It's fundamentals, not scheme. Someone should sit Stevens and teach him to look at the line and determine run versus pass. It's less about the Notre Dame game. We aren't stopping the run at all. Like, yeah, I mean, against Illinois, we certainly didn't do that. And the linebackers, yeah, it's not just the D-line. That's an absolutely great point, Jeff. And as we continue, yeah, Lincoln Riley, he's probably right, but, seems to be like there's enough hate for everybody right now at USC. When things are going wrong, that's how it goes. And who would have thought 2 years into Lynn with more talent is worse against the run? You know what? So this brings up a point, and I don't know if either of you guys saw this. I saw this just before we came onto the air, so like the three of us did not really have a chance to discuss it at length, before going on. But I'm not sure who tweeted it. I think it was a beat reporter. Not sure which one, but Lincoln Riley apparently said that Notre Dame and Michigan were equally physical, and that in this game it was not understanding the positions, the fits, the angles, the assignments. I have a hard time taking that at face value 100%. I think that he doesn't want to admit that his team's soft, because it is. Lincoln Riley just, he's not the kind of guy who's just going to say, you know what, I totally screwed up. I mean, he said that about the play call, but like on a larger philosophical, structural level, he's not going to admit that, my modus operandi is failing. He's not the kind of guy who's just going to, completely dress himself down over like micro elements. Micro details, yes, but not like the big picture. But that's what I'm upset about. It's the big picture. We're here in year 4. CJ Carr of Notre Dame plays poorly, and yet USC's giving up runs on 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8. That is not entirely about positioning and tactics. That's just you're getting your butt beat. I made the point on Sunday that, all right, if you're thinking pass on 3rd and 7 and they slip a run by you once, all right, tip the cap, they fooled you. But no, this happened repeatedly. Like, that is the difference, right? I think that is the essential thing. And like over 300 rushing yards. You can't say that Notre Dame and Michigan were equally physical. I'm sorry, Lincoln. Like, I just do not buy that for a minute. So, Ethan and Crash, Pete Carroll had, of course, Tell the Truth Monday. So here it can be Tell the Truth Tuesday. Like, I do not see a culture of accountability on this defense. And after seeing D'Anton Lynn do such a great job last season, like there was no question, like he dramatically improved Alex Grinch's leftovers and just did a really solid job. It was akin to what he did at UCLA in 2023. Why are we here, and why are we dealing with this stuff in late October, where the coach seems to want to defend his team's toughness, but in exchange for that, he wants to say just how poorly fundamentally schooled everything was. Like, this is a disaster. Like, everyone's just trying to make up stuff and throw it against the wall and see if it sticks. Ethan Inman.
Yeah, I mean, I saw that comment too. And I think it was Connor Morsetti who tweeted it out, because that was at least where I saw it. It's possible that multiple beat writers tweeted it out. The Connor Morsetti tweet says, Lincoln Riley says he thought the physicality defensively against Notre Dame was the same as Michigan, but the defense just missed assignments and wasn't as in sync. And so, yeah, my immediate thought is that's not better. It's not a better outcome. Like, I don't know. And it's not even really true. Like, there were so many broken tackles. Like, I mean, just think back to the kickoff return touchdown. Like, they had opportunities to bring down Jadarian Price multiple times inside the 25-yard line, and he ends up returning it for a touchdown because of like 3 or 4 missed tackles. So, and it was like holistic, and I don't even think it's necessarily such a, I don't know. I don't understand why in this situation he thinks it's better to have had people missed assignments because I think it reflects better on him if it's just like, oh, we just still don't have the physicality or the talent, but we, at least we're coaching them right, and at least we're, telling them where to go, and they're just getting bullied and they're just getting beat. It's kind of like, it goes back to that 4th and 1 call, where he tried to have Maava throw it to Lake McCree instead of just running it up the middle. Like, you make the calls that are winning, calls that make sense in a football sense. And then if your players get beat, then it's not on you, it's on them for, not stepping up to the moment and not being physical enough to win the play or win the entirety of the game. So I don't know. And it's just also like holistically in terms of how Danton Lynn's defense has worked this year, it's very much a defense that has looked on their heels, especially in the secondary. Like they play such soft coverage, and the whole game, it was like they were waiting for CJ Carr to uncork some 75-yard touchdown pass, which, to be fair, for most of the season, he has done that. But he wasn't doing it he wasn't even completing his 8-yard passes on Saturday. So I don't know, how at halftime they didn't realize, okay, let's actually make CJ Carr beat us in this game, especially after it started raining, which started happening at halftime. Let's make CJ Carr beat us in this game instead of assuming that, he's going to make good throws, because he's obviously having a bad day and it's not getting any better. And it never did. It never got any better. So, yeah, I just don't get that comment. Also, you brought up Alex Grinch. Another very unfortunate thing that I found out this weekend is that Alex Grinch's UCF defense is ranked 16th in the FBS. And USC is ranked 70th. So Alex Grinch is actually doing pretty okay. I mean, it's against worse competition, but it's also with theoretically worse talent. So I don't like that that's the case. Like, I mean, I am, after last year, I was as on board with Danton Lynn, and I was like, oh, it's obviously an Alex Grinch problem and blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't want this to be a Lincoln Riley problem. But the things that have come out in the last couple of days, it's just like, oh man, like I'm not even, 100% sold that it's a Lincoln Riley problem, but it just has caused me to rethink it a little bit, because like, it's just really peculiar that all of a sudden Alex Grinch is doing, not great. It's not like he has a top 5 defense in the country, but he's doing pretty solid under Scott Frost, who was horrible at Nebraska. So it's not like a Scott Frost thing either, I don't think. I mean, Scott Frost is probably more comfortable at UCF, but Danton Lynn suddenly looks worse. I don't know. So it's really quite a puzzling situation.
Well, it's interesting you bring up Alex Grinch, because I think I've read, like, I'm not saying obviously his defenses were like great before he started working with Riley, but it's like they were decent. They weren't like terrible like they were, especially kind of those years at Oklahoma, especially the 2 years at USC. So I'm wondering, is there something with that, with working with Lincoln Riley, that is like can cause coordinators to sometimes struggle, which I think is certainly just interesting to see.
Well, Crash, I mean, here I can give you a very clear answer there. Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma, if you followed Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma, like, he would win games against Texas Tech and Oklahoma State 66-52, 52-41. Like, his Oklahoma offenses so frequently maxed out that the defense just didn't matter. It was kind of an afterthought. Like, just defense just had to force like 1 or 2 field goals per game, and that was going to be enough because Oklahoma was hanging half 100. Like that. See, that's, I think, one of the things that it's worth stepping back and reflecting on is that, Lincoln was just absolutely in his wheelhouse at Oklahoma as a play caller. I mean, he's had some really good moments this season at USC, obviously 2022 as well. But at Oklahoma, like, it was just kind of machine cranked. You would take it for granted that Oklahoma was going to score at least 40 when it took the field for a Big 12 game, and it very often got into the 50s. Like, I watched plenty of Oklahoma football, 2017 through 2020, and I saw plenty of those Big 12 shootouts where, like, if you weren't scoring 35, you were getting dusted. Like, you weren't just losing, you were going to get beat by at least double digits, if not 3 scores. Like, Dana Holgerson's West Virginia, like, Oklahoma played 62-52 type games against so many different teams in the Big 12. So that is the constant, right? That if a Lincoln Riley offense is not hanging 50 or at least 45, it's big trouble in River City. And so when, if this USC offense just stubs its toe 2-3 times, that's enough to lose. And the defenses have pretty much remained the same. So, like, it goes to the top, right? It goes to the man in charge. It goes to the leader at the top of the pyramid. Like, this is not an accident. And I know that, Trumaine Carroll, his presence as strength coach is an upgrade from Benny Wiley, and it's not going to be fully felt until next season when he gets a full off-season cycle in the weight room with a lot of these guys. And actually, like, if Lincoln Riley said, you know what, I made a mistake bringing Benny Wiley with me from Oklahoma, and we're kind of caught in between a training cycle with our strength and conditioning program, like, hey, that's actually a logical answer. Probably would have been a better way to finesse this. But to say, well, we're not lining up well, and our fundamentals are bad. Yeah. Is that's supposed to make us feel better? So it really is kind of wild. But anyway, Crash, like, the Lincoln Riley, the Lincoln Riley coin is a two-sided coin, where the one side is the genius part, where, oh, we're scoring 59 points, we're scoring 66. Wow, laser light show all the time, greatest show on turf. And the other side of that coin is, if you don't get that laser light show, you lose against a good team with a good offense. So that's part of the Lincoln Riley mystery here at USC. All right, we're 20 minutes in. So I want to give Ethan the floor here for a little bit. And, Ethan's just joined Trojans Wire. So Ethan's writing some think pieces because Ethan's a really smart guy. That's why we have him here on this show. So Ethan, you wanted to write about, standouts on defense. And obviously standouts on defense is kind of a relative term since the defense hasn't been great. But you're trying not to just hate on everybody. That's why we love you, Ethan, because you're about love, not hate. So talk about this think piece that you did regarding, at the middle of the season during this off week, just some of the defensive notables for USC that you can see on the screen here at Trojans Wire.
Yeah. So I was, I think this kind of came from me earlier today, looking at just some of the stat sheets. And, I mentioned that little stat that I saw about Kevin Longstreet. He's not in this article, but it was, just a lot, me, picking out a lot of interesting stats and realizing, that there are a few players who've really stood out defensively. And, it goes hand in hand with my watching as well. These are players that I've seen play well. And then, I just thought it was interesting how that's shown up in the stat sheet as well. And so I just was kind of inspired to shout out some players who have done well and on defense, because, I think the defense as a unit, as it should, has gotten a lot of flack from a lot of the fan base. And so I just kind of wanted to look at, who are the defensive players that USC can rely on, when they're able to hold Purdue to 17 points or hold Michigan to 13 points. Like, why is that? Or whatever other teams that they've played this season and played decently defensively. And so I kind of got down to a few, and Eric Gentry is the obvious one. And I think, every USC fan would have guessed before the season that he'd be one of the best players on this defense, and also during the season. Bishop Fitzgerald has been incredible. And, he's obviously has the 5 interceptions, which leads the entire country, which I didn't know until today, but he's first in the entire country with in interceptions. Obviously also has the pick 6, but I think what really stood out to me about Fitzgerald's numbers is he's been a great tackler. He's second on the team in tackles, And I think I've also seen that kind of manifest on the field. Like I felt like in the Notre Dame game, he was one of USC's best tacklers. He made a couple of tackles to save, potential first down plays that ended up becoming fourth down. So he saved a few. He saved USC a few times and stalled a few Notre Dame drives, I thought. So, Bishop Fitzgerald. Also shout out Devin Tompkins, because I think, his name doesn't really get brought up as much as it should. And he's the best player on the best unit on this defense, which is the defensive line. And that, that alone kind of warrants consideration for him being the most valuable player on this defense. And then, shouted out a couple of the younger defensive linemen as well, Braylon Shelby and Cam Crawford. And then I also talked about DeCarlos Nicholson, which is more of an eye test thing than a box score thing. But, he's the one kind of relatively reliable, I think is the word that I used, relatively reliable cornerback on this defense, and in a position that is very decimated and very desperately needs at least some reliability. So those are kind of my guys. I ended up picking Bishop Fitzgerald as my personal defensive MVP at this point in the season. So I'd be curious, what you guys have to say about that, if you guys have any different takes on who the defensive MVP is. I think, in my mind, it really comes down to Fitzgerald or Eric Gentry. And I picked Fitzgerald over Eric Gentry for two reasons. And the first reason is because I think Eric Gentry kind of came into the season as a known commodity, like he's a linebacker, so he's supposed to make the most tackles on the team. And he's also been at USC for 4 years, and this is now his fifth year of college football. He's supposed to be a leader. And, when he's been on the field for USC, he's already been a star. So people kind of expected this out of him, I guess. Whereas with Bishop Fitzgerald, he had a great year last year at NC State, but like nobody really knew what he was at USC before this year. And so for him to really kind of come out and prove that to Trojan fans, I think is really cool. And then I also think my second reason is, leading the country in interceptions has to count for something, first of all. And then second of all, like he has really stepped up in the biggest moments, in my opinion. Like I think whereas Gentry's play, I'd say Eric Gentry's two worst games have been the Illinois game and the Notre Dame game, which also happen to be two USC's losses. That could be an argument for his value, if it's that him playing worse means that he's clearly, and USC losing means that he's clearly the most valuable player on the team. You could take it that direction if you wanted. But I think that in contrast, Bishop Fitzgerald has really stepped up and played his best games when USC is, kind of needed it. And I think his best game of the year was against Michigan. He had 2 picks and he also had the sack and had a good handful of tackles as well. And then, he played really well against Notre Dame, had like a season high with 10 total tackles, which was tied for the team lead. And like I said, had a couple of really key tackles there to save USC on defense, and also had the 2 picks against Purdue. So, and, that was USC's first real road Big Ten win, which was also important for the program's foundation. So I kind of pick him. But then, I'm curious what your guys' takes on this whole topic is.
Go ahead, Crash.
So I thought it was definitely a really interesting article to see you break it down, Ethan, and really just talk about kind of who those guys are. And I was kind of, when you were kind of getting to, who the MVP is, Gentry or Fitzgerald, I was going to lean Gentry kind of for a lot of the reasons you're saying. He's been here well. He knows the scheme. He, leads the team in tackles. But then you mentioned that his 2 worst games were the 2 losses for USC. So then I was just thinking, wait a sec, what about Fitzgerald? He's had big moments even in those losses, especially Illinois. And so, but then also he's just been really consistent this year. And like you said, he's also came in and no one really knew who he was. Whereas like Eric Gentry, I mean, all you had to do was just, as soon as Rob Ryan got to USC, pretty much, he was already just raving out what he'd be able to do. Gentry's like, what was he like? He's like, oh, he's like the unicorn. We can do so much. He's got these vines. So pretty much my point of imitating Ryan there was that they kind of knew what they were going to be able to do at Gentry. I'm not saying that's bad. I think it's great that Rob Ryan knew that he could come in and really just, utilize all of Gentry's strengths. But I think for Fitzgerald to come in kind of out of nowhere and really just solidify himself and be a huge presence for this defense, I'm going to agree with you, then it makes him the MVP.
So I'm going to answer the defensive MVP question this way. Now, young folks such as yourself, I'm old, you're young, but for older folks such as me, we remember Beano Cook, the ESPN analyst and also college football historian who was a regular face on television in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s. And he would make historical references. He'd weave historical references into his on-air commentary. Like Army would shut out an opponent, and Beano Cook would say, well, the United States hasn't had a Secretary of Defense that good since the FDR administration. Something like that. And here's a direct quote from Beano Cook, being the college football historian that he is. He was fond of saying, there are two teams you never bet against at home, the Russian Army and Notre Dame. I mean, that's Beano Cook. That's how he rolled. So I'm going to use a Beano Cook style expression. It's not something he actually said, okay, but it's something he would say. That having a defensive MVP for this 2025 USC team is like saying that Germany and Japan had a defensive MVP in World War II. Like, you don't hand out MVP awards for losers, or teams that are second rate, second fiddle, that lose in the big moments. So, like, I want to give a defensive MVP award. I do. Like, I want this team to do well. I want to love people for achievements, but like, we need to achieve something. We need to achieve something first. Then I'll give out hardware and trophies. And that really, to me, speaks about the culture of USC right now, the situation we have at USC right now. It's just not working. And obviously, there's a lot to consider in terms of the road